You know, one thing that I'm pretty much sure of is that you are going to love this gambit and all the traps that are contained in it. So the funny gambit that I'm about to show you works against d4 players. Now in the near future, I have a few more gambits against the e4 players as well. So I would encourage you to subscribe to my channel so that you don't miss any of that. So before I tell you the name of this gambit, it starts with pawn to d4, just a normal developing move by white. And here I recommend that you play knight to f6, c4, the queen's gambit. If you watched my previous video on how to play the Budapest gambit differently, by this time you already know that I'm a fan of pawn to e5 in this position. Now wait a second, this is not a dubious gambit which only works against lower rated players, and I'm going to prove it to you guys. And I'm not here to teach you how to play the Budapest, nope. I just want to show you some funny traps within this unique gambit which I want you guys to be trying against your unprepared opponents in order to win fast. So here after pawn to e5, I bet 90% of your opponents are going to be taking that free pawn on e5. And when you look at this position, and by the way, when you look at this position, this is just the normal Budapest defense. It's not even a gambit. It's called the Budapest defense, which has been played by Ivanchuk, Mamedyanov, Rapport has played it, Jobava, and those are classical matches that I'm just from disclosing to you guys. So after white takes on e5, I can tell you most of your opponents, if not 100% of your opponents, will think as if you want to play knight to g4 next, attacking their pawn on e5, which is not exactly what we are intending to do right now. In this position, I recommend that you play knight to e4. According to the Lichess database, the percentage score for white in this position is 46%, while 45% is for black. And funny enough, I was shocked to find out that there are actually many games in the Masters database that have reached this same position which you are seeing right now by higher rated players in classical tournaments. So I guess this is not just a dubious gambit that only works in bullet or blitz chess, but I mean you can also give it a try in your rapid games and see how things go. So in this position, I have highlighted the most popular responses by white, or let me say the most popular moves by white. By the way, the main area of our meat in this position is the weak f2 pawn. And white can play pawn to f3, pawn to e3, knight to f3, or even the rare pawn to g3. But it is funny to tell you that against each of these highlighted moves, the answer will be b6. I mean to all these moves by white. So before I show you these highlighted moves, just for entertainment purposes, what if in this position white decides to play pawn to f3? Well, white can pack his bag and go home because the game is over. The first thing that you guys see is queen h4 check, followed by pawn to g3, but that's not what we are going to do here. First of all, we start with bishop b4 check, and white has two different responses. White can either block with the bishop or the knight. For example, if bishop d2 blocking the check, this is when you should now play queen h4 check, and white has to play the only move pawn to g3 covering the check, after which you take the g pawn with your knight. Knight takes on g3, attacking the rook on h1. The idea is that if white does something else, we'll be more than happy to take the free rook on h1. And if h takes g3, well, it's checkmate. I mean, that's how you win the game of chess in just 7 moves. Now, I know to some of your advanced players that looks so cheap, but I challenge you guys to go into the Lichess database and see for yourselves how many strong players have fallen victim for this simple trap, even on chess.com. And by the way, this is not why I made this video. There are some more advanced traps that I'm about to show you, so I encourage you to stay tuned and see the rest of the traps. Now, what happens if white doesn't take on g3 with his pawn? Let's say, what if white just takes the bishop on b4? Now here is where you need to exercise a bit of patience, by not taking white's rook on h1. Instead, just play knight e4. That's checkmate. Because now the white king cannot escape. Oh, wait a second. What if white doesn't take the bishop and instead play queen to b3? Now this is the time when you take the rook on h1, and then after king d1 by white, you play queen f2. Bishop takes b4, you play queen takes on f1 with check. Bishop e1 covering the check, queen takes on g1. And as you can see, this is no longer chess, it's now Pokemon, where we are just eating our opponent's pieces. Yeah, I know that joke was dry. Let's move on. But before I go any further, please, you guys consider subscribing to my channel so that I can be encouraged to, continue making more wonderful videos just like this one and just for you guys. And hey, wait a second. Feel free to check out my courses and purchase any course that you like. At the moment, all you need to do is just to contact me via the contact details provided in the description down below, and I'll respond as quickly as possible, sending you a private link to the course that you want to purchase. Okay, so clearly we can see that pawn to f3 fails due to the lines that I just showed you. So instead of pawn to f3, you're going to see advanced players responding with moves such as pawn to a3. And I bet you know the reason already. They just don't want you to play bishop b4 check and start doing some chaos. Now after pawn to a3, what I recommend you do is pawn to b6, just paving way for your light squared bishop. And this is where things start turning sour. Here you will see most of your unprepared opponents playing queen to d5, just forking the knight and the rook on a8. This looks like you are losing one of these highlighted pieces. Now this is where you need to go crazy and give your opponent another free piece. First of all, white cannot take the knight on e4 because it is now protected by the bishop, which is unprotected because now white can take this bishop for free. No, Kaspa, these are just cheap tricks that you are showing us now. Come on, check in the Lichess database to see how many games I've reached this position again. You'll be shocked to find out that even 2700s, 2500s, and 2300s have fallen victim for this trap. It looks like white just won a free bishop. But the idea is that after we play knight to c6, please note that the only safe square for white's queen is the s6 square, because here we are intending to play knight back to c5, attacking the queen and also eyeing the s6 square. So white has to play queen s6, and in this position, when you count the free squares for this queen, it only has two, the b5 square and the f4 square. Now this is where you need to play knight c5, attacking the queen once again. Now the f4 square is not available for the queen. The only square remaining is b5. After which I recommend that you play knight d4. So you can see that the only available square for the queen is the b4 square. So queen has to go to b4, after which you are going to play queen c2 check, forking the king and the queen at the same time. Oh, I mean, you just won the queen, the free queen. So that was in the a3 line. Now what if white, instead of a3, what if white plays knight to f3, which is the most played move in this position? Well, again, you just go pawn to b6. You already know the idea, to put our light squared bishop on b7 and develop our dark squared bishop onto the b4 square. But again, if queen d5 by white, forking your knight and the rook on a8, well, don't worry, just be a good Samaritan and give him another free piece. Let him take the free bishop, because after knight c6, the queen is almost trapped. Again, we are just planning to play knight c5, trapping the queen on b7. White may still think he can rescue his queen by playing queen s6 again. Now, wait a second. Since there is no a3 this time, knight c5 is a big blunder, because when you play knight c5, you are blocking the vision of this dark squared bishop, which will give white time to play queen a3, rescuing his queen. And this is why most of you guys think these traps that I show you do not work, because you just lack patience. So be patient and also calculate your opponent's moves. So instead of playing knight c5 in an effort to trap your opponent's queen, here you just play bishop b4 check first, so that you ensure that the a3 square is still protected by the bishop. And after bishop d2 covering the check, that's when you now play knight c5, attacking the queen on s6. Now you can see that the queen cannot go to the a3 square. So the only square available for the queen is the b5 square. After which I suggest that you first take the bishop with check, and after knight takes, this time you do not go knight d4 to trap the queen. You just simply play pawn to s6 and white's queen is dead. So white has to sack, after which you take with your d pawn. So that's what I recommend you should do after knight to f3. Instead of knight to f3, what if white plays something like pawn to e3 in this position? Well, after pawn to e3, I still suggest that you go pawn to b6 anyways. And I'm sure this time you already know that white cannot play queen to d5 due to the same trap. I mean, madness means doing the same thing over and over while expecting different results. So this time white plays bishop d3. Here just be simple and play bishop b7. When you look at this position, Stockfish wants white to give up their bishop pair in order to have an equal game. I mean, after bishop b7. So this just tells you how good this gambit is. Anyways, with bishop b7, I also want you to note that we are indirectly eyeballing the g2 pawn. So here white has to play knight to f3. Now in this position, the truth of the matter is that white won't be able to hold on to their e5 pawn. I mean, if they try to, then they would just lose time and tempo and end up having many light squares weaknesses. Anyways, here I recommend you still continue with the move bishop b4 check, and in most cases you are still going to see the move bishop d2. I mean, there's no point for white to play knight to c3 blocking the check due to knight takes on c3, and after pawn takes, white loses due to bishop takes on c3 with check and winning the rook on a1. So that's why you're going to see white responding with either knight to d2 or bishop d2. So bishop d2 forces an exchange of bishops, after which I recommend that you just take that poor bishop with your knight, and after knight b takes d2, here you just play the humble queen e7, and also indirectly eyeballing the e5 pawn. And in this position, you know what? The most played move is castle shot by white, which is again a blunder because bishop takes on d2. Now it is white's knight which is overutilized. I mean, it is the only piece that was defending the e5 pawn. So if queen takes our bishop on d2, for example, we will be more than happy to take the poor knight on f3, doubling up white's pawns along the f file and winning back our pawn on e5. So anyways, you will see white playing knight takes on d2, and after queen takes on e5, well, the position is very much equal, if not slightly better for black on human level. See how dormant white's pieces are on the back rank. Yet we have active pieces. As you can see, the only piece which is remaining to be developed is the knight. Anyways, that was in the e3 line. Let's look at another line. Oh, instead of pawn to e3, what if white plays queen to d3 instead, attacking our knight on e4? I mean, should we play pawn to b6 again? No, this time we're just going to lose a free knight. So this is why you need to be very careful when playing these kinds of gambits. But anyways, queen to d3 leads to a crazy drawish line. Let me show you. If you are playing against a very strong player or a titled player and you are not just ready for their chaos, you can do a repetition here. Just go knight c5, and in this position you will see even Stockfish going back to the d1 square. And again you go knight e4. Stockfish will again play queen to d3. And again you can go knight c5. You will see the engine going back to d1 again. That's just how funny it is to play this line. But hey, in this position, white to play queen to g3. After which I recommend that you just play knight to c6, controlling the b4 square, because if he didn't play knight to c6, it is possible that white maybe was going to play b4 himself. In this position, the most common move is knight to f3, but you'll find some aggressive players who like playing bishop to g5, attacking your queen on d1. Now after bishop g5, I know the move that comes into your mind is bishop e7, but that is not what we are intending to do here. We are just going to play knight e4, forking the queen and the bishop. And note that the bishop is attacked twice by the knight and the queen on d8, the queen on d8. So bishop takes on d8 is forced, knight takes on g3 attacking the rook on h1, and that's why in this position h takes on g3 is forced, after which you take the poor bishop with your king. Again, you can clearly see that you are intending to take the e5 pawn so that you can be equal in terms of the number of pawns. And here is another example why white doesn't have to hold on to this poor pawn. For example, if they become greedy and play pawn to f4, holding on to their extra pawn, just play knight d4, intending to check on c2, forking the king and the rook. If knight on a3, just take the poor knight with your bishop and then do the needful. So king d2 is forced, after which I recommend you play pawn to d6. I mean, the line is over. This is just a beautiful pawn break. Here you are just intending to take the free pawn if white doesn't do anything and leave him with double isolated pawns. So that's why white doesn't have to attack your queen with bishop g5. Instead, the most common move after knight c6 is knight to f3 and not bishop g5. So here white should play knight f3. I mean, again, trying to hold on to the e5 pawn and make it hard for black to develop. Anyways, this is where black should play pawn to d5. The idea is to provoke white to take with n%. E takes to d6 is forced. Now in this position, if I was to turn on the Lichess database, you'll be surprised to see the percentage score for yourselves. I mean 75%, 100% win rate for black. And most of the black players here, they take with the c pawn, keeping the queens on the board. But even better is to just take with the queen on d6, and after queen takes on d6, bishop takes on d6, put this on Stockfish, and you will find that this is very much equal according to Stockfish because of black's massive development and piece activity. Okay, so that was in the d3 line. What if white plays something else? Let's say instead of d3, queen to d4, which they mostly play. Well, queen to d4 again attacks the knight, so there's no need for you to play pawn to b6. So here just be flexible again and play bishop b4 check. And it doesn't matter whichever piece they defend with. For example, bishop d2, well, here just take that poor bishop with your knight, and after knight takes on d2, you now play knight c6, attacking the queen and also eyeballing the e5 pawn once again. Please note that if white goes to e4, I mean, we're just going to take the knight with our bishop, which will force white to take with his king, losing the right to castle. So queen e3 is what most players play in this position, after which we castle short. And in this position, white is not happy with our bishop sitting on b4. That's why you're going to see them playing pawn to a3. After which I recommend that you just take the poor knight on d2. Now wait a second. White has to take with the queen to maintain equality. Otherwise, king takes d2, loses the right to castle again. So we just finished looking at queen to d4. Now what happens if white plays queen to d5 right away? Now in this position, if you tell me that black should play pawn to b6, you are not my student. Oh, I'm just joking, but pawn to b6 is a blunder because you will just lose the free rook. I mean, even the knight on e4 is hanging. Anyways, just like in the queen to d4 line, just play bishop b4 check, and after knight d2 blocking the check, take the poor knight, and after bishop takes on d2, instead of taking right away, just play queen e7. The idea is very simple. If white does something else like pawn to a3, just take the bishop and take the pawn on e5 again. Which is why in this position, bishop takes b4 is mostly played, after which you play queen takes on b4 check, and after queen d2, well, queen takes c4. Position is equal, and you also have equal number of pawns. So for those of you who still want to know the name of this opening, well, it's still called the Budapest defense, Fajarowicz variation.